Hey y'all, welcome back to part 3 of the blacksmith style push dagger. Sorry, I totally forgot to record grinding in the bevels and contouring the handle like I'm showing here. Rounded off the palm section and the top section of the handle just to make it more comfortable to handle. There's no hot spots or anything, so it's actually really comfortable. So now my next step is I'm just going to open up this finger guard section, finger choil if you will, to allow a finger to fit through there. My finger doesn't fit, my wife's does, but typically these knives are not used by women, they're used by men. So I need to make this comfortable for all hand sizes. So quickly you'll see I'm using a MAP gas torch. I unfortunately ran out of gas for that, so I switch over to a propane cylinder. MAP gas burns a lot hotter, so it would have heated that section up a lot faster, but the propane did fine. And here I'm doing a couple thermal cycles with the propane torch. Typically I would do this with the forge itself, but being that the blade is so small and thin, it didn't really take a lot of time to heat it up to a dull red and let it air cool. And I did this twice, and what this does is relax the molecular structure of the steel, reduces all the stresses from the forging. Now here I'm normalizing it, which further relaxes the steel, also ensures that it'll try to mitigate any warping in the quench process. This is a two-step process, and I do this twice. Basically, I have the oven programmed to reach one temperature and have a hold time, and go up to another temperature, hold time, and then it'll air cool, or it'll stay in the oven until it's completely cooled off, which is usually in about 24 hours. So that's the next day, and the forge is back down to 67 degrees. So now I'm on to hand sanding some of that oxidation off the blade. Probably don't have to do this, but I do. It's just something I like to do. I like to see the steel shiny again before I go and do the quench. So here I'm just using my 220 grit belt just to get some of that oxide off. But the oxide is so hard on sanding belts. I don't do this for very long until I switch to hand sanding. Sandpaper is a lot cheaper and a lot more readily available than sanding belts, so it makes more sense just to do it that way. And here's my PSA safety tip. When you are not working on a blade, do not leave the tip out to where you can actually cut yourself on it. You'll see right there a big bandage on my arm. Before I shot this section of the video, I accidentally stabbed myself in the forearm with just the tip. The blade itself is not sharpened, but the tip is so fine that it did lacerate my forearm pretty good, and I was bleeding quite a bit, so I had to go up and get a bandage. So just be careful. Turn your work safety side out, or safest side out, so that way you're not in danger of hooking clothes or flesh, because you will regret it. Trust me. Something I have to be reminded of every now and then. While I was hand sanding this, while I'm wearing gloves now, I poked myself in each thumb before I decided I needed to have some protection on my hands. Sometimes it takes more than once to learn one lesson, for me anyway. Typically what I use when I hand sand is some sort of lubricant, or like WD-40 or something like that, or Windex even works well. But I couldn't find either one, so this time I'm using just plain water. Worked okay. Just basically it just keeps the buildup of the dust off of the sandpaper as much. But the lubricants do work a lot better. I can't remember the brand of this sandpaper. I know it is sold at AutoZone. It's AutoZone's brand. I've never seen it at Home Depot or anything like that. I've done a lot of testing with sandpaper, different ones, Rhino Wet, Red Label, 3M, 3M Pro, bunch of different types. And this stuff that AutoZone sells, and I think Napa also carries it. Specifically for auto body work, so it's some really good sandpaper, and it lasts, and it's actually very abrasive, but yeah, it takes less time to do what you got to do with that. So here on the finger choil side of the blade, I'm trying to get right down to the base, and I'm not having much success. So I'm trying to manipulate the blade away from that section so I can sand that area a little bit better, and it's not really working too well. I kept stabbing through my sandpaper, so I just cut that excess off. So here I'm gonna try to use a wedge of some sort just to kind of spread that section up a little bit, and so I can get in there a little bit better, and it works out okay. That's why I was trying to save doing that till last, but I didn't want to heat the knife. I didn't want to heat anything up at all. Much rather than that finger guard section after the knife was quenched and hardened. So there it is, good enough for now. I'll do some more cleaning up and straightening of those lines later on. Just going to clean it up here with some acetone to get all the debris off, any oils that are left behind, get that ready for quenching. Double check and make sure I can get it fit in that quench tank there. And I'm going to fire it up in the kiln. You can also do this with the method that I was doing the thermal cycling with, which is a propane torch. It's going to take a lot longer. A lot of people do it in their forge. I like this method. If you can afford this method, I recommend this because it is more accurate, and it's easier to hold the temperatures for longer. There you just saw me put in a scrap piece of steel, and that's just to heat that up, and I dunk it in the tank to preheat the oil. It's not an exact science. Some people think it has to be an exact science. I've had good success not needing a thermometer to check the temperatures of that. I've actually seen some people use deep fryers for quenching it, which is a really good idea as well. So there you see the color isn't bright enough orange for me, which kind of threw me off. I was fumbling around with the phone in one hand, trying to open the door in the other with my tongs in hand, and I think the steel got a couple 100 degrees cooler than I'd like it to before I went for that dunk. There you see the after effects. So here I'm just going to clean it off, and then I'm going to test it with a file. Again, not an exact science, but skating off of the flats, but when I get to the edge, it's biting up a little bit. So I don't think it's quite as hard as it could be. 80 CRV2 is the only steel I've ever had to quench twice, because it gives me mixed results. So I'm going to do a second quench immediately after this. And I set my camera in a different angle so I can have both hands free and get that blade in that oil a lot faster. No warps, thanks to the thermal cycling and the normalizing. That helps in that process, keeping everything straight. So I'm testing it with the same file, and it sounds like it's skating a little bit better. It sounds a little more glassy, and on the edge it's not biting at all. So I'm confident that it's as hard as it's going to get. And reaching the end of the video, and appreciate it again if you could leave a like and a comment, and subscribe if you so wish, and hit that notification button. Thanks.